Hi, Michel.
Hi, Alexei. How are you?
I'm good. So, can you tell us a few words about yourself and about the tool you want to show us?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the co-founder and I'm the CEO of Airbyte. We're an open source data integration platform. And basically what we do is we help companies and users to just move data. Like how once you have data on like a spreadsheet, on file, on API, database, how do you bring that data into a place where you can be where you will be able to process it, whether it's a warehouse, whether it's another database, whether it's a file, whether it's a data lake. So it's really about enabling the access to all these siloed data. And I've been in the data space for the past 15 years, and it's a problem that I've continuously faced, which is you build data engineering team and they spend so much time on just maintaining and creating all these data connectors. And what we're doing with Airbyte is instead of having every single company to build a connector, instead we have general purpose connectors that can be contributed and that can be maintained by the community. So instead of having to do the work 10,000 times, you just do it once and 10,000 companies get access to the updated version
The beauty
of the
of open
connector.
source, right?
The beauty of open source. And yeah, it's been working pretty well for us. And yeah, what the tool I'm thinking of showing today is obviously Airbyte. And we're just about to release actually a cloud version of Airbyte. So I might just use the cloud version to show it. So bear with me if there is anything that goes wrong.
Mhm. But in principle, the cloud version and the local version, they're the
They're
same
the
ones,
same.
right?
Yeah, exactly. They are the same one. And we've put a lot of effort on um, making sure that people can onboard very, very quickly, whether it's on open source, whether it's on cloud. So just for open source, you just clone the repo, Docker compose up, and boom, you have Airbyte running. And after that, you have ways of deploying it at scale on a Kubernetes cluster. But that's really the focus is easy time to value on the open source project.
Yeah, so let's see that.
So basically, when you're looking at Airbyte, you have three core principles. You have what we call sources, which is where is your data? You have destination, which is where do you want your data to go? And then you have the connection, which is establishing a link between the source and the destination. So in that particular case, what I'm thinking of doing is just looking at the Airbyte repo and just get the Airbyte repo data into an S3 bucket, whether it's because you want to use that for like tracking number of stars, whether it's if you want to track number of team members or things like that, or like commit and you want to do some community analytics. This is one of the use case you would have with these two connectors. So if you go for a source, what you would get is you can pick a connector and you have access to a collection of connectors that were either contributed by us, by the team, or by our contributor. So let's get GitHub. There we go. Let's authenticate.
So it's like a no-code tool, right? So you don't need to write the code. You just click authenticate. It authenticates. It stores the credentials somewhere, and
Correct.
then it's ready to use. Cool. It's like Zapier, right?
Correct. Except that Zapier is very geared toward events, like receiving events and dispatching events and like doing some processing on the event. Here we're really taking an extract and load approach, which is do the things that can be that are very, very similar from one company to the next. So staying as close as possible to the schema of the data from the source. So let's get that configured. Um, up. And let's only look at what we have on master. And here we can set up the source. And what happened behind the scene is we're just testing, making sure that the configuration makes sense. And so let me actually zoom out a little bit so we can see more information. And yeah, for everything related to extract and load, no code, low code works very well because it's the same process. when you want to do transformation, that's when things become a little bit more complex and where you need to generally have a lot more code. And that's why like successful project with DBT that can do the transformation is just, that's where your business logic sits. When you're on the extract and load side, you don't have that, that same, yeah, that same problem. S3.
So now we want to get stars from GitHub and put them to S3, right?
Exactly. And you can see that we have a bunch of different destinations. And right now we've focused a lot on what we call like blob storage. So Azure, GCS, S3, as well as databases and also data warehouses. One thing that we're looking to also do is to integrate more and more with APIs. So what the market today calls reverse ETL, which is once you have data into a warehouse, how do you actually push it to a Salesforce, to a HubSpot, or to a different type of database once the data has been processed, segmented, and everything. We're not focusing on that right now, but that's one thing that we can do with how we've structured Airbyte and with the data exchange protocol that we've set up. So here, bucket name, let's use mine.
How did you configure S3? Like you probably need to provide some sort of key, right? Then I see it
Yes.
below.
Yeah, so I have a bucket on US East, and here I'm just going to pass in an access key.
It's a password, so I will not be able to use it for mining Bitcoin right now, right?
No, you won't be able to do that. And just for the purpose of so here, yeah, for everything related to blob storage, we can support different type of file format, whether you want Avro, CSV, JSON. So I'm going to use JSON for now. And there we go. Let's set up the destination.
So now it's testing that it can write something. It can access the bucket.
Exactly. And it's really, the goal here is to make it very, very simple to configure. We're still also working on like splitting up options, but what is necessary and what can be optional. You know, for example, when you're working with databases or blob storage, you very often have like something that you need to customize depending on the volume. So these are things that we will have more in the advanced settings for connectors. And so once you have the source and the destination set up, what it's going to do is going to pull the schema from the source. And once you have the schema from the source, for example, for GitHub, it shows you every single type of data model that you can extract from the GitHub API. So whether you want to get users, team, Stargazer, etc. And that gives you access to all this type of data that you can dump into S3. So first of all, let's set up a sync frequency. So we support incremental updates when the API or the file or the source supports it. And what happens when you say every 2 hours means that the sync is going to run every 2 hours. And there we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable all the sync, and I'm just going to select some that are not too big so we can see it to the end. So I'm just going to select Stargazer and users. And here you see the way to replicate is what we call full refresh happen, meaning that every time the sync is going to run, it's going to create a new file with all the data. And you have other thing, which is full refresh override, which is going to delete the existing data and override. Or you will have what we call incremental, which is only pick what has changed since the previous sync. So for this demo, let's do this. And yeah, I think we're good to go. You know what? Let's do incremental. And boom, let's set up the connection. And
you're doing this for Airbyte GitHub repo, right?
Yes, correct.
I just unstarted so we can test it. So I will start it from my computer and then we will see if it appears.
Let's do that. I will be able to run a manual. So right now you're unstarted?
Yes, I did.
Wonderful. So let's do that. And yeah, so what's happening behind the scene is and that's something that you can actually deploy with open source as well, is it's going to dispatch workers on our Kubernetes data plane. And the thing that we're looking to do with both cloud and open source is to have a support for having more than one single data plane, so that if you want to move data from different regions in the world or for different cloud, you can still be able to just manage it from one single control plane. So that might take a few minutes. And while we're waiting,
So typically, if we don't use the cloud version, if we use if we deploy the thing automatically, Airbyte or on our infrastructure, then it would connect to, let's say, our EKS cluster or
yes,
our Kubernetes cluster.
Okay. Exactly. And one thing that we've done with the data connectors is they are all packaged as Docker images. Mm-hmm. And we have a very strict protocol for how these Docker containers can actually communicate. And that allows us to be compatible with any language for how you build your connector. So for example, if you're using Kafka, the Kafka client is going to be much better if you use the Java one than if you use any other, because that's where they put all their effort. If you're working on building a connector for an API, then Python might be better. If you're working on another API and the company is already providing a CDK that is written in Rust, then you should be using Rust, because that's where you will get the best developer experience. And by having that completely into Docker containers, it allows us to completely abstract away the environment in which the connector needs to run. And also it's very easy to run on infrastructure like Kubernetes or other containers orchestrator. Cool. So I think we're almost there. Let's see what's happening on S3. I hope I don't need to log back in. There we go. Alexei demo. So
can you make it larger? It's not
super visible. Yes. Let's do it. So here, so that's why I asked Airbyte to write the data. So it's broken down all the files by streams. I mean, all the streams into separate directories. And here you can see I have access to the list of Stargazer. So let's download the current file. So I can show you what it looks like. I might need to shut down my screen. And in the meantime, while we wait for this, let's actually sync again so we can see. Can you start again?
I just did.
You just did? Okay, so I'm going to force a new sync. And while we do that, let's, how do I remove my screen? There we go. So let's go into my console. So I've just downloaded the file. The name is file.e. So I can just do file.e. And basically now you get the list of all the Stargazer of the Airbyte repo. And you have access to all the information. So we put some random ID on top of each data. We also track when the data was actually replicated. And then we have access to all the data about when it was started, who was the user. And it's very, very close to what the GitHub API is returning. And from there, once it's landed on S3, once it's landed on your warehouse, you can decide to just do the transformation you want, or like filter out, just select some of the fields that you really care about for your analytics. But at least you have the raw data. And so if in the future you want to do more analytics, you don't need to resync the data because the data is there on your processing engine. So let's see where we're at with the other sync. So it is syncing. Let me put you back on this. chat. Let me share everything. Just to make sure you don't see my Notion on the side, because I have my secrets there. So right now it's looking at the stargazer, and let's wait for it to happen.
So it's also checking. It's only looking at the new stargazers, right? So it gets the again sends a request and then it runs some sort of diff, right? And only puts the new ones.
Exactly. So here you see. So first of all, you can see that there is a difference between what was seen the first time. Initially, we had 6,000 emitted record, and right now we have 74. And what happened is user is full refresh. So you probably have all the users, and you probably have one record for stargazer. So let's get into and showing that this is
It's like 74 people just start the repo while we were talking.
No. Like the 74 is like the other stream that I enable. It's like the users of the repo. Like basically it's people from Airbyte. So let's look at this one. This one is small.
It's much smaller.
Yep. So I'm going to assume that it's going to be only you. So 9EA.
You probably have a very large screen.
Yeah. So you can see my screen.
Yeah,
my
that's
console.
Much better. Yeah, maybe you can enlarge it a little bit more.
Yep.
That's better.
Yeah. And yeah, there we go.
I think that's me.
That is you.
That is me.
So,
yeah. Well, it seems that it works.
Yeah. And so but basically that's, you cannot do incremental for every APIs. And obviously at that point, you depend on what kind of feature the API suggests. And that is something that when you write connectors as a contributor, you can decide what to expose, if you want to expose just for refresh because the API does not support it, or if you actually support the incremental. And behind the scene, what is happening is like every time we run sync, we store the state of where we stopped. And then when you write the connector, you generally have logic on how you inject the state into all your requests, and how you make your request to the API. So that is Airbyte 101.
Yeah, thanks. So if somebody wants to contribute to Airbyte, let's say write a connector, how do they go about that?
So if you want to build a connector, so we have actually, let me show you. We have pretty extensive documentation on how to do it, especially around connector development. So today we have different what we call CDK, which is a connector development kit, which is tooling and like helpers to get you to build these connectors faster. So we have one in Python, .NET, JavaScript. And what is interesting is actually we also have one in Go that someone contributed. What is interesting is we mostly focus on Python and Java. But the .NET and the JavaScript were contributed actually by contributors.
Like, let's say if somebody wants to connect to Azure, probably they would go with .NET, right?
Probably. And yeah, and after that we have a speedrun course on how to create a source very, very quickly. So just focus on, you know what you're doing, and this is how you do it. And the good thing is, once you've built your first API connectors, that's where you have the most learning. But after that, in general, like APIs, they look the same. And we're actually building, especially during Q2, we will be building a lot more tooling to make it simpler to build connectors so that we push more toward no or very, very low code than what it is today. And that will help both on the community on like creating more connectors, but also on the maintenance side. Like the more code you have, the harder it is to maintain. So we want to just push the amount of code to be very, very low.
If there are connectors, all the connectors I need, does it mean that I can get away without writing a line of code, or I still need to write some code somewhere?
Say it again?
Like, let's say I want to use Airbyte and the connectors that are there are sufficient, right?
Yeah.
Does it mean that I can get away without writing any code at all? So it's like a no-code tool for me?
At that point, yes. I mean, if
And
you don't need, so if you don't need to customize a connector, or if you don't need to create your own connector, and you can just use this, all the out-of-the-box connectors that are provided in open source, then yes, you can get your data replicated. And the only thing you would have to do at that point is just Docker compose up, and boom, you can replicate data. So that's the magic.
yeah, but for what kind of cases I would need to write code? So if you don't have a connector and I need to connect to
Yes.
something, then this is one case. Are there other cases when I would need to write something for an existing connector, maybe to
Yes.
customize something?
Yes. Like connectors is 1,000 paper cut problem, meaning that the first person who's going to write the connector is likely going to write it and only pull the data that they care about. So I don't know, if you're pulling data from, let's say, MailChimp, maybe the only thing you care about is emails open and user list. But when you want to use MailChimp, maybe you need to have access to, I don't know, some segmentation information, and it's not available. So at that point, you can decide, okay, either I create my brand new MailChimp connector, or what I'm going to do is just look at the existing one, and I'm going to enrich so that the rest of the community also has access to that. And then bit by bit, these connectors become more and more featureful. And this is actually how we kind of grade connectors. So they always start on the alpha stage. And then the more usage, the more features they get, the more they just grow into beta and then into GA. Generally available.
Okay.
But that is the power of that is really the power of like building it as an open source project. Is people will do it for their own use case. Some people will do it for everybody, but what you want is just to have more than one person to contribute to a connector and just making it a very rich connector.
Who is the main, let's say, user of Airbyte? Is it a data engineer? Is it a data analyst? Or maybe it's like a person from marketing who just wants to pull data from MailChimp and put to a dashboard?
Yeah, so we don't have, because it's open source, we're targeting mostly technical profiles. Like marketing might be a user, but they are definitely not the main. They are not the one introducing Airbyte into a company. But when we focus on people, we see Airbyte as sitting in between data engineering team and data analytics or analytics engineering team. And it's about the data engineering team giving, like, enabling and making analytics team more autonomous. So we target these two type of profiles. So on the data engineering team, what we're doing is everything can be controlled by an API. We're about to release something next week. It's a CLI. So on the data engineering side, it will allow people to have like GitOps type of management of Airbyte. So versioning on GitHub, all the configuration of Airbyte and all the sources and destination. And on the other side, we also have UIs, which are very low code, no code, like as we've seen, which is more for profiles that just know what sources they want, what destination are available, and just want to replicate the data there. And the only thing they focus on is getting the credentials, and then the data starts flowing. So it's really about sitting in the middle and trying to serve these two profiles.
Yeah, so I imagine data engineers set this up once, or
exactly,
like at least they do some fundamental, like they lay down the fundament, and then analysts come and start using this until up to the point when something, I don't know, they need some customizations. Then they come to data engineers and ask, hey, like this field seems to be missing. Can you help us get
Correct.
that? Right.
Correct. And that's why also we want to push the connector development to more and more low to no code, is because once it's no code, then suddenly a data analyst or analytics engineer might be able to just copy and paste the configuration for a specific stream, change a few inputs, and boom, you have the missing stream. And just getting into that state where, yeah, more and more people that are less technical can actually use and not just be users, but also contributors.
That's pretty cool. Do you have any advice for anyone who is watching this?
I mean, I would say like just give it a try. We have also a very lively community on our Slack. And so if you have any issues, you can just join our Slack. In terms of advice, I would say is if you're starting to introduce a warehouse, the first question you will have to ask yourself is how do I bring data into my warehouse? And very often you will be tempted to just build it yourself internally, which will work if you have one source, which will work if you have two sources, which will break once you start getting to three sources, because now every single week something is going to go wrong. And then you will have to add monitoring. You need to, oh, your cron is not running. So now you need to monitor your cron. Oh, but now it's not integrated into my OC pipeline. So I need to just put that into Datadog. Oh, I need to connect it to PagerDuty. And you start having like massive feature creep and project creep, and you just start building a massive beast just to orchestrate a few connectors. So it's something that is easy to build initially, but extremely, extremely hard to maintain. So that's why it's open source also. It's just, you don't have to build it. You can just take it. It's from the repo, and you can get there.
I think I can guess how this idea came to your mind. And that this was the situation you were in, and
Yep,
you thought, okay, like how can we actually solve this problem? And this is
exactly.
how Airbyte appeared.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's just I think every single data company or data team suffers from that one day or another. And once you don't realize when you're getting in, but you really understand why you're in.
Yeah, sounds familiar to me. Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for doing the demo. Thanks for answering questions. I will put all the links in the description, so please send me some links. I will put them there.
Sounds good.
And that's all, I guess.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Alexei.